So if you're planning to apply for Canada study permits anytime soon, there are three things I want to share in this video that can help you in making a choice and a decision in terms of what you want to do and the documents that you need to get ready. Number one thing to take notice of is the requirement for the proof of finances for Canada study permit application. Initially, it was $10,000 for per applicant. That was increased to 20,635, but from the 1st of September 2025, that amount has been increased to 22,895 Canadian dollars for a single applicant. And they also updated a few things in terms of the requirement for proof of finances. Before now, if you are doing multiple years of program, let's say you're doing a 3 years program, most times you will pay a tuition deposit. It can be $2,000, $1,000, depending on what is required by the college for a 2 years program. You can just pay tuition deposit. But now, if you check IRS's website, what they've said categorically is that you must provide us with documents that prove you have the required funds available for all the costs that are listed above. And these are the documents that they have outlined. Number one is that you must provide proof that you have paid your tuition and then you also have your housing fees. They have not, categorically stated that you have to pay for accommodation before arriving in Canada. But as far as tuition is concerned, they've mentioned that this must be accompanied by other documents proving you have sufficient funds to cover living expenses and transportation costs. So most times, people have asked in the past, how do I calculate how much I need for Canada study permit application? Number one thing is going to be your tuition cost, right? If you're doing a 1 year program and your tuition is $16,000, you're going to provide proof that you have that $16,000. And of course, you've paid as much tuition as possible. Then you will need to show that you have funds for living expenses. Now it's around 22,895 for a single applicant. And if you check the IRS's website, there's a list for if you are applying for a family of two, let's say husband and the wife, you need around 28,502 for just the living expenses. I know it's a lot, but I believe they've done their calculations and they've decided that it is best at this point to increase this amount based on the living expenses in Canada. Now, what they've mentioned is that if you're doing multiple years of a program with multiple years, let's say it's a 2 year program, they've mentioned that you must provide proof that you have paid your first year tuition. This is relatively new. So if you're doing a 2 years program, so don't just plan for the tuition deposit now. As much as possible, if you're doing a 2 years program, pay the complete 1 year tuition. It's on their website. I'll include the link in the description. If you're doing a 1 year program, as much as possible, if you can even pay the full first year tuition, the better for you. But if you want to pay half tuition and show the remaining tuition balance, your living expenses, and the transportation cost. Now, they have not categorically stated how much is the transportation cost. You can look at how much it is to get a flight from your home country to Canada. Usually, I would suggest budget around $3,000 to $5,000 for travel costs, just to ensure that you are on the safe side. So, just make sure there is a lot of sufficient documentation to back up anything you're showing now for fund. Is very important. It's not just to show that, oh, I have the money, I have 50,000 Canadian dollars. They need sufficient justification of where that fund is coming from. Especially now, it has even become more critical because of the reduction in study permit. So they're now very strict in terms of deciding or approving visa I mean, it doesn't depend on the visa officer that is reviewing your application, but overall, I believe they have baseline criteria that they use to evaluate your eligibility for finances and all that. But it's very important to put in more effort now. Okay. In the past, I've seen people doing maybe, just the basic things and providing minimum document and things worked. Now I've seen cases, where people provided even as much document as they can, but, they still get refused the visa. And the major reason for the refusal is usually your asset and financial, information is insufficient to support the stated purpose of travel. And that's insufficient fund, as I alluded in my previous videos, is not really that your fund is not enough, right? If you've seen, if you have applied for GCMS note in the past, like 90% of the time, it's not that your fund is not enough. It's around justification of the proof of fund. If somebody is sponsoring you, do you have sufficient proof of relationship with the person? If you are showing $40,000 as a closing balance, how has been your account over the last 4 months? Has it been fluctuating? They put all of those things into consideration. If you're doing a business, what documents are you able to show to back up the source of or the justification that your business is actually generating income, right? Is you're employed, have you showed pay slip, employment letter, and all of the necessary documentation. So these are all of the factors that they put into consideration. And if they are not satisfied, they're just going to say your application has been refused due to insufficient, your asset and finances are insufficient, right? So it's not necessarily because your fund is not enough. So put a lot of emphasis on getting your fund arranged. Applying for admission is one thing. It can be relatively easy to get admission, especially when you're applying to colleges or if you're applying for, to some universities that are not so competitive. Getting admission is one piece. The fact that you have admission doesn't necessarily mean that your application is going to go very smoothly and it's just going to be approved right away. So you still have to put in all of the necessary effort. The second thing I would like to talk about is the officer decision note. So before now, when your visa is refused, mostly you need to apply for a GCMS note. This GCMS note, you get the detailed reason why your study permit was approved. Although there are times, when uh, there are times where the GCMS notes that you get from the visa officer is not really detailed enough, meaning it's not so different from the general refusal letter that you have in your IRCC account. But from the 29th of July 2025, IRCC introduced the Officer Decision Notes, ODN. The purpose of this, as they alluded to ensure transparency in visa decision, which means when your application is refused, instead of just having that generic reason why your application is refused, your application will now come with this officer decision note, which means you don't technically need to apply for GCMS notes because whatever refusal information that you get in this letter is going to be the same you will get in a GCMS note. I think this is a very welcome development because not a lot of persons are able to apply for GCMS note, and usually it will take around 30 days for you to get your GCMS note. Now, if your application is refused, right away, you get your notes, and then you can use that to re-strategize for future application. And I always tell people, reapplying quickly is not the solution. Your application was refused today and you want to apply next week. And you know that, the reason that they've given in your node, you probably need like a month or two to sort out those reasons, right? So it's not about applying very fast. Just make sure that whatever they've stated in the notes that you've received, you've successfully, tackled or addressed those issues before you reapply. This is a welcome development. The third thing, it's about reusing provincial attestation letter. Before now, when you apply for admission, and you're giving an attestation letter, it will come with an expiring date. Let's say, I think for 2025 quarter, that is going to be December 31st, 2025, right? And then for 2026 quarter, that is going to be, December 31st, 2026, as the case may be. Even though you apply for January 2026 or May 2026, if you are receiving admission now, most likely you're going to still be within the 2025 quarter, right? So it may kind of put a little bit of pressure in terms of timeline to apply for your visa, but you can always reach out to the school if you need them to reissue your provincial attestation letter. That aside, what I'm try to get to in this video is that if you've applied for visa and your visa get refused, even though your provincial attestation letter still has the validity, let's say to the end of the year, you can't use that to reapply for visa. I probably, in the last couple of weeks, I've seen about maybe 5 applicants that the application got refused because they used or they reused a provincial attestation letter. So when you apply moving forward for study permit, my advice would be, when you have a refusal, as much as possible, if you plan to reapply, reach out to your school as soon as possible to see when they can issue you another attestation letter. There's another thing that I've also noticed that one of the applicants that I know, the person that applied to a particular school, and then what happened is that the person requested for a provincial attestation letter. Now, the school said, before we reissue you a provincial attestation letter, we need your GCMS note. Of course, this officer decision note, covers for the GCMS note, except they specifically request that they apply for GCMS note, but you can send this to them and just let them know that this, kind of covers the detailed reason why the application was refused. Now, one of the schools said, before we reissue you a provincial attestation letter, we need a written explanation from you to explain that how you're going to address whatever IRCC have mentioned in the notes. So which means it's not just going to be business as usual. It might be easy, in some schools for them to reissue you a provincial attestation letter, but for some other schools, they may require you to provide an explanation for the justification about how you're going to address what IRCC have outlined in your letter in the notes. Because if you're going to be doing the same thing and they are issuing you a decision letter, there's no proof that you're going to be a strong candidate. And if there's somebody else that they can issue that attestation letter to, and the person has higher chances of getting approval, they're already missing out of that potential, right? Because what a lot of schools do here is that they will issue attestation letter a little bit above. I mean, they have a quota right? There's a quota that they allocate to each school, but it's usually a little bit above the total number of students that normally come to the school, right? If, for example, per year they get like 10,000 international students, attestation letter might be a little bit higher because not everybody that receives attestation letter end up coming to the school, right? There's been some issues around the quota especially in the Atlantic province. So that's the reason why, in fact, is then when you apply for admission and application get refused, but they will even give you like a month in the provincial attestation letter, before you apply, immediately you get your admission, right? So that way, if you don't get it, they are still within that timeline of that 1 year, so they can reissue the provincial attestation letter. So these are just a few things to take notice of, when you are trying to reapply for Canada study plan. I know it has been really tough with people having multiple refusal, but it is your choice if you decide to try again. And these are a few tips that you can follow. But if you think things are still a little bit difficult, you are looking for somebody to talk to one-on-one, there's going to be a link in the description. Check out my website, reach out to me, and I'll be glad to provide you guidance in this process. Once again, thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't subscribed, do where to hit the subscribe button, and then let me know in the comment section, where are you watching from? And then let me know which stage are you in the Canada Study Permit application process. And then also let me know, is this your first time applying? Which program are you applying for? There might be other persons that are planning to attend it at the same school. And then you guys can, connect and, keep the comment section busy. Once again, thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.